if your bank account isn't just, a collection of numbers, but the literal frozen extraction of your life's vitality?
It's a heavy thought.
It really is. Welcome to the deep dive. And before we get into anything else today, if you enjoyed exploring really complex, boundary-pushing ideas, please hit that like button and subscribe to the show. We have got a massive one for you today.
We really do.
Yeah, we're doing this really extensive, incisive review of a provocative new 2025 ebook by the author Conrad Riker. And it's called Money, Unit of Account, Medium of Exchange, Store of Value, and Congealed Life Energy.
Quite a title.
It is a mouthful, but you will definitely want to hook into this one. So make sure you check out Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books to buy it. And also follow the author at Conrad Riker on Substack to stay plugged into his work.
Absolutely.
Today's mission is to completely unpack this ultra-long, fascinating manifesto. Now, just to give you some context on the target audience up front, this book is explicitly written for a red-pilled, manosphere, and men's rights activist readership.
Yeah, that's the explicit target demographic.
Yeah, right. It essentially positions itself as a survival guide for what the author describes as a rigged, feminized economy.
And before we dive into the text itself, it is really crucial that we establish some ground rules for our discussion today.
For sure.
Because the source material we are examining is highly political charged. It features very strong, uncompromising critiques of left-wing, Marxist, and feminist ideologies. So I want to make it abundantly clear to you, the listener, that neither of us is taking a side here.
No, not at all.
We are not endorsing, validating, or promoting the viewpoints of the author, nor are we taking a stance on the political right or left. Our sole goal today is to impartially report on the contents of this book, to dissect the author's specific worldview, and help you understand the exact arguments contained in the text.
Exactly.
We are treating this strictly as an intellectual exercise to understand a very specific, rising economic philosophy that is definitely gaining traction.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the core philosophy of this book starts with a complete redefinition of what wealth actually is. Riker's foundational concept is that money is not paper.
Right.
It's not digits on a screen. He refers to it as congealed life energy and the frozen sweat of your brow.
It's a very visceral image.
It is. Think of it this way. Treat your bank account not as a vault of cash, but as a battery. And that battery is storing the literal hours, the physical effort, and the vitality of your existence.
The actual time you spent alive.
Yes. So if you make $30 an hour and you buy a $6 cup of coffee, you didn't just spend $6. You spent 12 minutes of your finite, unrecoverable life energy on that latte.
Which puts a whole new spin on a Starbucks run.
It really does. So when you look at your savings, Riker argues, you are looking at the tangible verification that you exist and produce in a material universe.
What's fascinating here is the historical and philosophical lineage of that exact idea. Riker doesn't just, pull this out of thin air. He directly connects this premise to John Locke's labor theory of property.
Right, from the 17th century.
Exactly. For a bit of background, Locke basically laid the groundwork for modern property rights. He famously argued that the earth is given to mankind in common, but when a man mixes his labor with the earth...
Like farming or building.
Yes. Say he puts his physical effort into clearing a forest or farming a field. That resulting property becomes his exclusive extension. He has poured his physical being into it, so it is quite literally a part of him.
Wait, let me make sure I'm following his logic here. So if money is just a modern abstraction of that harvested field, he's saying that taking that money is the same as taking the labor itself.
That is the exact leap the book makes. Extending Locke's logic, Riker argues that taxing this fruit of labor, or redistributing it, is not merely a bureaucratic financial transaction.
It's much deeper.
In his worldview, it is a form of partial enslavement. It is the seizing of a man's very past time and physical effort to fund systems that the individual did not explicitly consent to.
Wow.
The text frames the modern tax apparatus not as a social contract, but as a mechanism actively siphoning away a man's stored life energy.
And he doesn't just stick to 17th century philosophy to make this point. The book brings biology into the mix to back this up.
Yeah, he leans heavily into the hard sciences here.
He does. He cites research from neurobiologist Robert Sapolsky, specifically looking at testosterone and dopamine pathways in the male brain. The text uses this to explain why certain people build empires while others don't, leaning heavily on a biological concept called the winner effect.
The winner effect is really a central biological pillar of his entire argument. In biology, this effect describes how an animal that has won a previous aggressive encounter is more likely to win future encounters.
Because of the brain chemistry.
Right, because the victory triggers a surge of testosterone and dopamine. It literally alters the brain structure to increase confidence and risk tolerance. Riker uses this data to argue that higher testosterone naturally increases a person's willingness to step into the unknown.
Right.
But more importantly for his economic theory, he argues it lowers what economists call time preference.
Time preference. That's basically the adult version of the marshmallow test, right? The ability to delay gratification.
In a nutshell, yes. A high time preference means you want the reward right now, immediate consumption.
Give me the marshmallow now.
Exactly. A low time preference means you are willing to suffer a little now, taking a risk, to build for a much larger reward in the future. To build a business or invest in the market, you must have a low time preference.
You have to play the long game.
Riker posits that this biologically driven masculine drive to conquer chaos, delay gratification, and build systems is the essential engine of wealth creation.
And he contrasts this by outlining two distinct economic modes according to his framework.
Yes, he breaks it down into a masculine economy and a feminine economy.
Right. A masculine economy, which he says is built on low time preference, delayed gratification, and rational risk, versus a feminine economy, which he characterizes as having a high time preference, demanding immediate consumption, safety, and emotional validation from the state.
That's his core dichotomy.
So if we accept his premise that delayed gratification and risk are the engines of wealth, we have to look at how our institutions have supposedly changed over time, because the book argues that these institutions were built on one mode but captured by the other.
He spends a lot of time on this institutional shift.
He claims that Western civilization was fundamentally built on the nomos. Now, before we get into the capture of these institutions, what exactly is he meaning by nomos?
Well, in classical terms, nomos refers to law, custom, and order. But Riker adopts it to specifically mean patriarchal order, objective logic, and strict hierarchy.
Like a rigid structure.
Yes, it is the boundary that keeps chaos at bay. The text argues that this brutal, reality-based foundation has been hijacked by what he terms gynocentric and Marxist ideologies.
Ideologies that prioritize feelings.
Exactly. Feelings, safety, and consensus over objective facts and brutal market realities.
And to illustrate this nomos, he spends a lot of time analyzing the industrial titans of the 19th century.
The guys who built the modern world, essentially.
Yeah, men like John D. Rockefeller, Andrew Carnegie, Cornelius Vanderbilt, and the inventor James Watt. Now, if you take a standard American history class, these guys are usually critiqued as robber barons who used monopolistic practices to crush competition.
That's the standard academic view.
But the book views them entirely differently. He calls them high temple priests of efficiency. How does he justify framing them as priests of efficiency rather than monopolists?
Well, according to his worldview, these men utilized that masculine will to power to conquer the chaos of nature. Think about it. Before Rockefeller, refining oil was a wildly dangerous, inefficient, and expensive process.
Right, it was practically a gamble every time.
By ruthlessly standardizing it, Rockefeller drove the price of kerosene down so low that average working-class people could finally afford to light their homes at night.
Wow, so he views that as a public good.
He views this not as exploitation, but as these men effectively lowering the cost of living for the masses through sheer competence and low time preference. They build an infrastructure of the modern world.
Okay, so he sees them as singular, decisive leaders who pushed humanity forward. But then he takes a massive pivot to contrast those guys with modern corporate structures.
Specifically HR and DEI.
Right. Human resources departments and diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. He uses a rather vivid phrase, describing modern corporate bureaucracy as a gynocentric silence.
It's a very evocative term. The author argues that these modern bureaucratic structures function as a maze designed to punish excellence and flatten competence.
By forcing consensus.
Yes, in his view, forcing a hierarchical corporation to operate by consensus and prioritize emotional harm avoidance over raw productivity is a structural mutation.
It's going against nature, in his eyes.
He claims that when an institution accommodates the feelings of the incompetent rather than rewarding the harsh truths of the competent, it leads inevitably to stagnation and bankruptcy.
And there is a really memorable analogy he uses to make this institutional shift perfectly clear to the reader. He compares it to the difference between fiat currency and gold.
That's one of the strongest metaphors in the book.
He describes gold as hard, immovable, and limited. Basically, masculine logic made manifest in the physical world. You can't print more of it just because you're feeling stressed.
Gold doesn't care about your feelings.
Exactly. Fiat currency, on the other hand, the paper money we use today, is soft, pliable, infinite, and subject to the emotional whims of central bankers. He actually calls the fiat system a matriarchal fantasy of endless resources.
And this systemic critique naturally extends to his view of modern universities as well. The text asks, where does this ideological shift originate? Riker points straight to the academic echo chamber.
He really goes after the universities.
He argues that modern economists and sociologists rely on postmodernist frameworks to deliberately distort classical economics.
Wait, before we go on, for those of us who didn't major in 20th century French philosophy, he specifically points the finger at thinkers like Jacques Derrida and Michel Foucault. Who are they, and what do they have to do with economics?
It's a crucial connection for his argument. Foucault and Derrida were foundational figures in postmodernism. This is a school of thought that essentially argues that objective truth is an illusion, and everything is actually just a power structure.
So nothing is real, it's just who has power.
Right. If you apply that lens to economics, you stop looking at markets as natural forces and start looking at them as systems of oppression. Riker claims these academics use this framework to misrepresent Adam Smith's concept of the invisible hand.
Adam Smith being the father of modern capitalism, right? The guy who said that individuals pursuing their own self-interest unintentionally benefit society as a whole.
Correct. Instead of viewing capitalism as a system of decentralized, spontaneous order that lifts people out of poverty, Riker argues the Academy uses Foucault's deconstruction to label capitalism as inherently oppressive.
Just because it's competitive?
Simply because it historically reflects and rewards masculine values of competition, hierarchy, and aggression.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because he takes these massive macroeconomic concepts, these critiques of academia and corporate bureaucracy, and he shrinks them down to the most intimate level possible. The family.
He brings it right into the living room.
He basically takes Adam Smith's famous pin factory metaphor, which explains how dividing labor makes a factory vastly more productive, and applies it directly to the traditional household. The book views the patriarchal family as the ultimate primal economic unit.
The foundational building block.
Right. In this model, the patriarch acts as the invisible hand of the home, rationally allocating resources for the survival and prosperity of the unit, rather than yielding to short-term emotional whims.
He is very specific about the economic synergy of the traditional family. When labor is divided, with one person securing resources and another managing the home and children, the unit operates with a massive competitive advantage.
It's just more efficient.
Riker argues that the legal and social systems of the past centuries supported this unit, but the modern era has intentionally dismantled it. He warns extensively about what he terms the divorce industrial complex.
How does he claim that works in practice? Because it's a bold claim to say the system intentionally dismantles families.
According to the text, the modern legal system, specifically no-fault divorce courts, combined with the welfare state, actively incentivize the dissolution of the family.
By making it easy to leave.
By making it financially viable and sometimes profitable to break the contract. By doing so, he claims, the state breaks down that powerful economic synergy of the household.
And what replaces it? If the family unit is broken, where do those people go?
The author argues it creates two things. First, a dependent class of atomistic consumers who now have to buy everything individually.
Oh, like 2 houses, 2 sets of appliances, 2 heating bills?
Exactly. It drives consumption. And second, it creates a heavy reliance on government welfare for stability, which feeds back into that high time preference feminine economy he described earlier.
And he points at the very real human cost of this. He cites the alarming rise in what are called deaths of despair, suicides and substance abuse, specifically among working class men.
His argument here is quite dark, but he relies on solid demographic data.
He says that when society strips men of their economic utility within a family structure and labels their natural drive as toxic, it creates a massive psychological void.
He states that the family unit relied on the pillar of male leadership as an evolutionary command, not a social construct. When you remove that purpose and penalize that biological drive, you see the grim statistics in male health and longevity.
The numbers don't lie.
The book points to these outcomes as the direct result of disenfranchising the primary producers of a society.
Okay, so if the family is the fortress, how does Riker suggest men interact with the world outside those walls? Is it just every man for himself?
Not at all.
Actually, no. This brings us to the power of the old boys network. Now, usually that term is used as an insult today, right? A symbol of unfair exclusion.
A barrier to entry.
But Riker completely flips the script. He defends exclusionary male spaces as absolutely vital to building wealth. He points to the year 1801, when the London Stock Exchange essentially formed because a small group of male brokers started meeting in the coffee houses of Threadneedle Street.
They needed a private space to operate.
They needed a place to trade, test ideas, and build trust. And he brings it all the way to the modern era, citing the famous PayPal mafia in Silicon Valley.
Right. The group of men including Elon Musk and Peter Thiel.
Exactly. Who built PayPal and then went on to found Tesla, LinkedIn, and Palantir.
To understand why he champions these spaces, we have to look at the evolutionary justification he provides in the text. Riker cites the work of evolutionary psychologist David Geary to argue that these male-only spaces are not oppressive conspiracies designed to keep women out.
They aren't just boys' clubs for the sake of it.
Right. Rather, he frames them as necessary biological incubators. They are harsh but effective environments where men test competence, refine strategies, and form bonds based on honor and merit.
Without the HR department stepping in.
Exactly, without the moderating influence of emotional harm avoidance.
And he brings data to back up why this matters for your bank account. He cites a 2019 study from the St. Louis Federal Reserve showing that male-owned businesses that have male mentorship networks actually enjoy a staggering 65% higher 5-year survival rate compared to those that don't.
65%. That is a massive edge in the business world.
It really is a significant statistical advantage, which naturally leads to the operational side of the book.
Right, the practical application.
What does a listener actually do with all this? That's the real question. The book isn't just theory. It transitions into a master plan for reclaiming what he calls financial sovereignty.
And the first actionable defense strategy he introduces is something he calls the temple test.
The temple test. It is basically a ruthless checklist you have to run through before you spend a single dime of that congealed life energy we talked about. You have to ask yourself, does this expenditure serve my empire or does it serve my ego?
It is a highly stoic approach to resource allocation.
Exactly. What does that look like in practice, though?
Well, if you are buying a luxury watch or a flashy car on credit for social validation or vanity,
Your ego.
yes, your ego, you are essentially squandering the hours of your life you work to earn that money. You're bleeding out your congealed life energy to impress strangers.
That makes total sense.
But if that same money buys appreciating assets, practical education, or tools for production, which is your empire, then you are deploying that capital efficiently to secure your future autonomy.
And building on that personal discipline, Riker advocates for a much larger structural strategy, which he calls the exit, because he views the current legal and financial architecture as fundamentally designed to extract wealth from men to fund the welfare state.
He argues the only rational response is to remove oneself from that rigged system entirely.
Right. He suggests utilizing flag theory, a concept of geo-arbitrage popularized by thinkers like Tim Ferriss.
Flag theory is the idea of diversifying your life globally so that no single government has total control over your assets or freedom. You plant different flags in different countries to optimize your independence.
Give us a concrete example of how someone actually executes this geo-arbitrage.
Sure. Imagine you are running a highly profitable online business in the United States. Under Riker's framework, you might plant your business flag by incorporating an offshore trust in Nevis.
Which has incredibly strong asset protection laws.
Very strong. Then you might plant your residency flag in Puerto Rico to legally minimize your tax burden. You are legally walling off your wealth from domestic taxation and litigation.
Okay, I see.
Furthermore, he advises heavily securing liquid assets in hard metals or cryptocurrency so they can't be easily inflated away or frozen by a central bank.
And he makes a very specific point to clarify his stance on this. The text does not frame this as criminal tax evasion.
No, not at all.
He frames it as a moral defense mechanism. In his view, the modern state acts as a hostile actor, an anglerfish looking to consume your productivity. Therefore, protecting your assets through legal offshore trusts is the modern-day equivalent of building a stone fortress to defend the fruits of your labor from a siege.
It's a total rejection of the standard social contract. And he brings that exact same disruptive energy to the topic of education. He actively advises readers to drop out of modern universities.
Yeah, as we mentioned earlier with Foucault and Derrida, he literally calls universities expensive daycare centers for Marxist indoctrination that burden young men with inescapable debt.
Instead, he says you need to look backward to the Renaissance workshop model.
Right. Seek out a master-apprentice relationship. You don't learn from a textbook in a safe space. You learn through doing. And specifically through using a rather vivid phrase, the scar tissue of failure.
You have to get out there and actually bleed a little in the market.
If we synthesize his ultimate goal, it culminates in the concept of building the citadel and the file.
The term file is drawn from the science fiction author Neil Stephenson.
Right, from the Diamond Age.
Yes. In Stevenson's novel, nation-states have collapsed, and people organize themselves into files, which are essentially sovereign networks or tribes of like-minded individuals bound by shared values and economic interests rather than geography.
And Riker insists that men must build these micro-fiefdoms to survive the coming economic stagnation.
And he takes this all the way to a grand evolutionary conclusion. He argues this from a purely biological standpoint, utilizing the famous Simon Ehrlich wager.
Explain that wager real quick because it's vital to how he views the future.
The Simon Ehrlich wager was a famous bet made in 1980 between biologist Paul Ehrlich, who believed overpopulation would lead to mass starvation and resource depletion.
Right, a very pessimistic view.
Very. And economist Julian Simon, who believed human innovation would outpace population growth. Simon won the bet handily because commodity prices actually dropped over the decade.
So innovation won out.
Right. Riker uses this historical event to posit that human intelligence and ingenuity are the ultimate resources, not a burden on the planet.
Therefore, the book concludes that modern feminism, which he claims devalues the traditional family and promotes sterility or lower birth rates, is quite literally an evolutionary dead end.
Exactly. According to the text, the ideologies that fail to reproduce will naturally fade from history. The book states the future belongs to traditional natalist patriarchies.
People who are actually having kids.
Basically, groups of high-trust men who insulate their assets, build outside the traditional fiat system, and actively have children to pass their empires down to.
That's the citadel.
He believes those who maintain the discipline to build and the structures to preserve their legacy will simply outlast the current institutional model.
So what does this all mean? Let's bring this right back to you, the listener. Whether you view Conrad Riker's manifesto as a desperately needed wake-up call in a crazy world, or you see it as a highly controversial lightning rod of a book, you cannot deny that it offers an uncompromising, completely unfiltered look into the economic philosophy that is driving the modern manosphere.
It's a perspective you can't really ignore.
It challenges you to stop looking at your financial decisions as just boring math on a spreadsheet. Instead, it demands that you view your money as a literal defense of your personal autonomy.
And as we conclude our analysis of the text, I want to leave you with a final, lingering question to explore on your own. It's something that builds on this material, but pushes it into your everyday life.
I love this. Let's hear it.
If we truly adopt Riker's mindset, that our money is the crystallized, finite energy of our lifespan, how might that fundamentally alter the way we view our daily interactions with digital media, social approval, and the modern attention economy?
Oh, that's good.
If every dollar spent and every minute wasted scrolling is a piece of your life you can never get back, who is really profiting off of your time?
That is a heavy question to chew on, and exactly why we do this show. Thank you so much for exploring this with us.
It was a fascinating discussion.
If this deep dive got you thinking, please like and subscribe to the show right now so you never miss a deep dive. And as promised, if you want to read the source material for yourself, check out Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books to buy Conrad Riker's ebook.
It is a massive read.
It really is.
Yeah.
Also, don't forget to follow @Conrad Riker on Substack to stay plugged into his specific brand of thought leadership. Until next time, keep questioning everything.